So you can't take a look at the church that Joseph Smith, all right, I'm rambling, stop rambling. You want to get this thing done in 15 minutes, not 5 hours. It's just a simple thought, Barry. Tell it to yourself, just the way you think of it. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the things that I've been thinking about the Mormon Church lately. I was, as I've talked in some detail on other videos, I was a Mormon for a good portion of my young life. I joined the church when I was 16 years old, and I was pretty much active in the church and committed to the Mormon way of life until approximately age 40. So, that's 20, 25 years I was pretty active in the church. And I didn't join the Mormon Church for exactly the reasons that the Mormon Church wants you to join. And I've explained that in other videos, and I won't. But one of the claims that the Mormon Church made, it wasn't particularly appealing to me, and it really didn't matter. It was that the Mormon Church is the only true church on the face of the earth today. It's the only way, by being a part of that organization, by being baptized into the Mormon Church, which they claim is the restored church. Restored in the sense that Jesus had a church on the earth when he lived here. There's not a lot of evidence in the Bible that Jesus had such a church. He certainly didn't build buildings and chapels and hold meetings on a regular basis. Not much in the way that we would recognize as a church for sure. But nonetheless, Joseph Smith, when he founded the church, or officially incorporated it in the spring of 1830, he made the claim that it was the restored church. He gave it the name, as a corporation, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So the Mormon Church, by name and by proclamation, is the Church of Jesus Christ, the only Church of Jesus Christ. The Catholic Church, yeah, they might have a few members, but they're nothing. They're nothing. Same with Lutherans, Methodists, all of those other churches, which Joseph Smith apparently took a good look at before being told by God and his heavenly messengers that he was going to restore the true church. One of the things that I think occurs when you make the claim that you're the only true church is that your church would appear remarkably like the church that Jesus founded and back in his life. I don't think you can find a whole lot in the Mormon Church, in its early history especially, and maybe even more so today, that resembles anything like what Jesus was propagating or teaching while he was on the earth. I don't think Jesus ever established any temples. And it wasn't Jesus' temple that he went to, it was the Jews' temple. Joseph Smith founded in the spring of 1830 what he claimed was the restored Church of Jesus Christ. He gave it the official name in the incorporation of the church, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. By proclamation, he said that it was the same church that Jesus had established when he lived on the earth, and that church was somehow lost through sin, through indifference, through inattention. I don't know. Not clear on how it was lost, but some form of evil took it off of the earth. And Joseph Smith was here to restore it. And that's what he did. He did it because God told him to. God instructed him, don't join any of the churches because they're a bunch of fake teaching, false claim promoting organizations. Don't join them. We're gonna start a church of our own. In fact, it's going to be the only true church. By making that claim, I think Joseph established that incorporated in that church was going to be all the teachings that Jesus and God and the Holy Ghost and whoever was involved in that would want and produce in a church. So the true church would be all-encompassing. It wouldn't leave anything out. Everything that Jesus taught, everything that Jesus did and established back in his time would be here again. If any questions arose about how life should be lived, about the purpose of the church, and that sort of questioning that might arise, would be answered by the establishment of this church. It would all be incorporated in the church. Jesus could, if he did not explicitly explain everything at the beginning in his church, he was there to answer questions, and apparently that was Joseph Smith's duty as well. If you had questions about this church, about how you should live your life and what God had in store for you, Joseph had the answers. I do think that if you can look at the church that Jesus did or did not establish, when I read the Bible, I don't read about a evangelical ministry going around setting up churches in various locations. I think the Apostle Paul might have been involved in some of that, but that was 50 or 100 years after Jesus was dead and gone. So to me, there was no Church of Jesus Christ. There was no Jesus. I think that the Bible, and this includes the Old Testament, New Testament, complete fiction. But if you accept the premise that Joseph Smith set forth, Jesus established a church, I'm putting it together again. He saw glory in that. I think Joseph saw a way to get rich in that, or at least make a decent living. Because I think Joseph Smith was a grifter, and I'm not going to drift too much from my subject right now. But if he had legitimately been setting up a church, it was his responsibility to include everything that was in the church as it existed back in the time of Jesus, and to be able to answer all the questions. When you answer questions, they should sound just as if they came from Jesus, because Joseph is the mouthpiece on earth of Jesus. Now, one of the things that I find problematic? No, we're problematic right now in the middle of a pandemic. No, problematic. One of the things that I find problematic about the claim that Joseph Smith had the only true church, and further he claimed that it was the only way to enjoy God's true love and his true gospel, and baptism into that true church, the Mormon church, was the only way to return or to have access to entering heaven after you die. And the Mormon church, like most Christian churches and churches in general, I guess, their focus is not on what happens in this life, but what comes in the life afterwards. And that's when the big payoff is. The big grand prize is achieved not in this life, but when God gives you your ultimate rewards after you're dead and gone. The nice thing about making that sort of promise and holding to that as your goal in this life is that you never realize it, and you have no way to judge if it's ever going to happen. You don't see it happening to others, and you won't see it happening to you until after you're dead. So that's quite a deal you're making at that point. But the problem that I'm going to talk about today, and one that I found troubling even when I was in the church, is that if the only way to get to heaven is through baptism, and that's what Joseph and the church teaches, into the Mormon church, that's the only way in, or if you were baptized by John the Baptist or Jesus when he established his church back in the Bible, and maybe a few more from the Old Testament, if you accept Joseph Smith's claim, the Mormon church is the only true church, it's the only way that you can have entry into heaven or chance at it. That's called baptism. Now, I call baptism in that sense, I think of it as the cosmic lottery ticket. It's the one that you can use to get into heaven. It won't get you into heaven, but it's your only chance of getting into heaven. Just because you're baptized doesn't mean you're going to go to heaven, but if you don't get baptized into the Mormon church, you won't get into heaven. They don't say you're going to go to hell, but if you're not in heaven, by most definitions, that would be hell. But we're not going to slice too thinly that argument. So, if your only chance of getting into heaven is through baptism into the Mormon church, that means of all the people that have lived on the earth, only a few million, let's say, let's be generous and pick a number, 25 million people have been in the Mormon church and the church that Jesus formed and whatever came from the Old Testament. Only 25 million souls ever got the ticket, the chance, the cosmic lottery ticket of baptism to get in heaven. What about all those other people and who lived on the earth, who obviously were human, who were children of God? How do they get a chance to get in heaven? Or do you I think what you're looking at is one, there is no chance for them to get in heaven, so that shows God's love for this little group of people that he's, 25 million people that he's allowed to have a chance to get into heaven. The rest he just dismisses and he won't deal with them after their lives. They can go and do whatever happens outside his presence. That seems awkward to me when you're claiming God and his love and benevolence for all of mankind, yet he only chooses 25 million or so people to have even a chance of getting to heaven. Now, if you find yourself holding that lottery ticket, you've been baptized because of your persuasion and because of your position now with that cosmic lottery ticket, I would think you can understand, yes, this is definitely a manifestation of God's love. And you don't worry too much about those other people because God has taken care of you. He's punched your ticket. Let's not be concerned with them. The other side of the question is, well, so the first supposition is God only makes heaven available to 25 million potential cosmic ticket holders to get into heaven. 25 million people that are baptized. The rest, they're out. We don't know how many people have lived on the earth. We know that there's, we're approaching 10 billion now. We've got 8 plus billion on the earth today. And if you say that man has been around here on earth for 50,000 years, not 6,000 like the Bible would have you believe, or Bible believers. I don't know if the Bible makes that clear, but their believers do, including many in the Mormon church. They're only 6,000 years. But let's take the scientific approach and say, look at what they tell us. They say that man, as we are today, modern man, appeared somewhere around 50,000 years ago, and in the intervening time there have been 100 to 200 billion people on the face of the earth. And if you go back further than that, the iterations that led to modern man, maybe a little less modern man, we could make a case that there have been 500 billion humans living on the earth. I don't know where God would draw the line. I'm not, his thinking is certainly not my thinking, and say this is where I really started caring about my children. This is when they became like me. This is when I created them in my image. So those people should have a chance at getting back to heaven because I love them. They're my children. Yet we only have 25 million maybe people that have been baptized and have the ticket. maybe 200, 300, 400 billion people that do not. So how do you reconcile those two thoughts when you think about God? You have this place as heaven. Is heaven so small that it can only fit in, the whatever percentage of that 25 million make it to heaven? Or is God's love or his capability so limited that he can only accommodate 25 million people? Or does his love only extend to these that he's chosen, these 25 million? All of those are troubling to me. The idea is, it would seem that God should at least give everybody a ticket, a chance. If you're going to have a lottery, give everybody a ticket because you love them all. Now, if I were God, and I don't claim that I ever will be, although Joseph Smith told me that I would be, I wouldn't be this God, I would just be a God. But if I were God, that wouldn't be the plan I would come up with. I only had 2 children. And, I wouldn't favor one of my children and put the other one in some position where I give them none of my love or none of my care. I love them both. I equal, and that's the way I think about God as Father. I think of that as fantasy, but God as Father loves all of his children, yet he only gives 25 million out of billions and billions even a chance of getting to heaven. Joseph Smith said, well, here's how we're going to take care of that. He had an answer because I think he saw that problem as well, that so few of people who lived on earth, even at the time he was living, Joseph Smith, maybe by the time he died there was 20,000 people in the church, maybe. Probably not that many, but that's a very small segment of the world, even at the time he was living. That was God's church restored. You would think God would. Why wouldn't God? All right, I'm not going to go too big of an aside here. But why wouldn't God, if he's going to restore his church, why would he just go to the Pope and say, we're going to redo this thing? I mean, the Pope had a big organization. God could go down there and he could work with the Pope. Cut a deal, get that church, don't restore it, just go in there and rehab it. Then you've got a worldwide way, you bring in a few million right away and then you can work on the whole world. No, let's go to some obscure little illiterate country bumpkin and get it started over there. That's our best chance. I guess that's consistent with the way God sent his son back down in a time when we didn't have the way of communicating that we do today, but now I've done an aside, I'm back to the subject. So Joseph Smith said, what God has told me is we're going to set up temples so that we can... Now, what he set up temples for, Joseph Smith, was obvious. He wanted to have sex with young girls, and lots of them. And the way that he could do that in a legitimate way was if God... under threat of death to Joseph, if he didn't do this plural marriage thing in the temples and get all that going, Joseph Smith would be destroyed by God. That was in the Old New Testament, wasn't it? Where Jesus was forced people to marry him and they all had all those wives. I think that was there. Man, I'm a little weak on that one, but that's an aside again. I'm trying to stay on point. So the temple was set up by Joseph Smith, the idea of 10 temples, and the first one was being built during his life. Wasn't finished, but it was there, evidence of it was coming. They'd already started doing the ordinances, the ceremonies in the temple. The most important to Joseph Smith, I think, was the what he called celestial marriage, heavenly marriage, where he married and stoofed all these young women. Some of them already married, some of them not even at the age of consent. But that's, again, an aside. The other reason for the temple, he said, was so that you could baptize people who were already dead. The Bible in the New Testament seems to mention that idea. I'm not convinced that it does, but there is a verse that at least hints at it, which says if the dead don't rise, If the dead don't rise, if they don't have resurrection, then why are you baptized for the dead? And the Mormon Church explains that there it is. See, his followers are baptizing dead people for the dead. And I think everything that you do in the Mormon Church is for the dead, but because you don't get your rewards now, you get it after you're dead. So, to me, the verse is more saying, if you're not going to rise, if you're not going to live after you die, why are you even baptized? Why bother? That makes sense to me. That's not what it says in the verse. I'm reading between the lines. I probably am wrong, but that's the way I would interpret that. But even if it is talking about what Joseph Smith claims it is, and that is that you're going to baptize people for the dead in the temples, and that will free them after this life to choose to go to heaven. They can, if they didn't hear about Jesus' true church in this life, someone by proxy, some living human, will be baptized on their behalf, and then they will have the chance to go to heaven because that baptism took place. I hope I am not confusing you, but that's the idea. A living Mormon goes to the temple, gets a name, gets baptized for that person who's already dead. That person over there is in the spirit world being taught by missionaries from, I guess, the Spirit Mormon Church with their spirit tags. And do they have spirit clothes or are they naked? And now that would be an aside if I start talking about that, but I'm not gonna. But again, two problems there. I'm going to try to quickly get to the end here because this will be the end. The math of that, to me, it escapes me. All math escapes me, but I don't know how 25 million people, even if all of them were working full time on just that one thing of being baptized for dead people, would get around to being baptized for 500 billion people or 200 billion people. That's a lot of dunking. I think if the 25 million that I'm talking about, they're not all alive. Alive today, there's only 10 million to do the work in the church, not 25 million. So even if the 10 million today were full-time being baptized for the dead, how long would it take them if they stood in the water 12 hours a day to be baptized for enough people so that 200 billion, 500 billion people living in the spirit world could now have a cosmic ticket of their own to get into heaven? I don't think the math works. My calculation was that if you took that group and let them work full time at it, that it would still take 8,000 or 10,000 years to just do that, just to get them baptized. And in the meantime, probably more people than are doing the work are being born every year in the year they're doing the work. So they won't ever get it all done. I could be wrong on that math. I probably am, but it would still take a long time. Weird. Second thing is, and this is the last point that I'm going to talk about here because I've rambled on and probably already gone past what's on my camera, and I'm really going to be angry. The idea of fairness in accepting the gospel. If I'm a Hindu living in India and somebody brings this idea today of Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon, I would, if Hindus laugh, I don't know if they have a sense of humor, but I would think they would laugh that whole idea right out of their hovel, whatever they're living in. I don't know what Hindus live in India, but they would throw that right out without even consideration. That would be their chance, which they won't get again. God only gives it once. That's all he's obligated. You get a one-time chance at it. And that's the end of that guy's chance to get the lottery ticket to go to heaven. You take that same Hindu, let him be dead now. He's living in the spirit world, and he's looking around, this is not the way I'd calculated it. This seems quite different than what I thought was going to happen after. What are these missionaries doing here? Oh, they're telling me about this Book of Mormon and the Bible and Jesus. And, oh, there's Jesus right there. I can see Jesus, and the heavens over there. I can see that. Now, maybe I'm going to accept it. I'm not, I'm seeing more. The idea that you know all that and then it's offered to you versus you're living in India as a 100% saturated Hindu rejecting it. How is that fair? How now the equation switches the other way. The guy who's dead and getting the opportunity has a better shot at getting to heaven than the guy who's alive and having the opportunity. Where's the humanity? Where's the fairness in all this? Where's the logic in all this? Where's the organization in what I just told you? There probably isn't any. I'll go back and edit this, assuming I just recorded it all, but it's not going to be clean. It's not going to be neat. But at least I can do it now. I have said what I have to say on the subject.